are watching Well-Traveled Life, and thank you for being here. I'm Jennifer, and I have Daniel Edward with me today. Daniel is a fellow traveler, but not just a traveler, he is a travel writer. He is also the cruise and travel director on the Noordam for a significant portion of our trip through Australia and New Zealand. In his travel writing, which is in London for the
City AM paper and World of Cruising magazine.
While he's doing that travel writing, I found out he is writing about places he's never been. I want to begin with, where's a place that you would like to go that you have written about but you haven't been?
Okay, so two places I'll share.
Fair?
The first is I did a big project in the fall just past.
Okay.
50 different articles about Kruger National Park in South Africa and other safari experiences in Africa. The only part of Africa I've been to is Morocco, which is yonks away from South Africa. I've never seen the Big Five out in the wild. I've never gone safari camping, and I was writing about these deluxe lodges and all these beautiful places, and I've never stepped foot anywhere near them, let alone actually been to those specific places. The other place would be, and it connects in with the itinerary we're doing now, it's in Australia. I wrote an article about the Quincan Dance Festival, which is in Laura, which isn't actually all that far from where we were. We just didn't have time to be able to get in, and we were there at the wrong time to go to the dance festival. But it's a dance festival which brings together many different Aboriginal communities. It happens every other year or every third year, I can't remember. And so when it happens, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I was commissioned to write an article about the dance festival, and it was the first time I'd really interacted with Aboriginal culture and learning about the different sacred meanings of various different parts of nature in the area and other forms of artwork that connected into it. And there was so much stuff that connected in. And at that point, I hadn't even been to Australia yet. I was like, that's gotta come.
Gotta do it.
And so I would like to come back in order to go to that.
So when is the next year that it's going to be held?
I think it might be next year, 2023. Because the pandemic put a halt to it. And so I think that might be the first one back.
I have this sense that you have some really quirky interests when you travel. I say that because we were learning about jails in every port, and and we learned about classic cars in different ports. Mm-hmm. So I have this feeling there are some quirky interests. What are the things that you find especially interesting or that you're looking for when you go travel?
I'd say I'm looking for a few things. First of all, I'm looking for whatever speaks to me there. One of the things that people, I think, get surprised at with me is that when I go away, I don't plan anything. I go and I just see what happens. I always hope that the story will find me. I think if I go with the story in mind, I'll find what I'm looking for, but I won't see the place. I might as well have written that from my desk at home. So I go with very little assumptions about what it's going to be like. I have a very basic itinerary and I just see what happens. Okay. So that's the way I like to travel. But when I am there, I like to look for things that are different. I don't really, and this is going to sound really odd for somebody who does travel writing, I find a lot of travel writing really boring, very dull, because it's so samey. You could actually ask an AI machine to write travel articles for you, because basically you know what they're going to write already.
Well, I've heard you say that you don't want to write about jaw-dropping amazing views.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that it's a luxury whatever, because it's just a label, it means nothing.
Okay.
And so I want to find the story that's unique and something special and something memorable. And I tend to find that it's the thing that I least expected, but then the thing that I start talking about with people the most. And then I start going further into that. And that was how the jails started. Because if you remember with the jails, we went to Alatau in Papua New Guinea, and I just decided I was going to go for a quick walk. I had no aims at all. I was just going to get off the ship and have a walk. And this guy started walking with me, and I was a bit nervous at first. You never know why somebody joins you on a walk. And so I made quite clear to him pretty early on. I was like, I don't have any money on me. So if you...
This is not a business proposition
if you're
for
expecting me to pay you for this walk, it's not happening. and I really didn't have any money on me. And he said, no, that's okay, I'll just join you for the walk. I was okay then, just a little bit apprehensive. But we got chatting, and then a little kid joined us for the walk as well. Can I join you? I was like, yeah, more the merrier now. Come and join. I don't have any money on me, but you can join. And so we were talking, and then I asked him about this. I don't know if you saw in Altal, there were lots of sort of red splats on the floor everywhere.
The beetle net.
Yeah.
You need to watch my video on Altal.
Okay, so you've already spoken about beetle nuts. So he told me that was what they were chewing. And I'd come across these nuts on another trip when I was in Bhutan.
Okay.
They chew it there. And then he started telling me that actually if you chew enough of them, you can get drunk.
Hi, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a drug.
Yeah, which I didn't realise.
Yeah.
And then he started telling me about a time which he had got drunk. And so he was very open and sharing. And so he told me about this time that he got drunk and clearly got a little bit too far gone, and he got arrested. And then off the back of that, he was telling me about what the Alatown prison was like. And I was like, wow, this sounds incredible. So different from what I've known of as a prison. It was more like a cage from the way he was describing it. There was no bed, it was just bars on the floor, bars on the walls, and bars across the ceiling. To me, that is the definition of a cage. And so then, of course, it triggered another thought, which was about the convict ships going to Australia. And so then I looked up, is there a convict jail that we can visit in Australia? Then I saw that actually there are hundreds of them. And so suddenly we were always talking.
So that set you off. That's great. That's a great example of where the quirky comes from. I think that's exactly it. It's the people you meet. I think we feel very much that way that when we travel. It is the people, and they will define our experience and define what we take away from it.
I try to write about the people of a place rather than the place. A place is geography. To be honest, I never liked geography at school. That didn't do it for me. But people are the thing that make the story. And sometimes that comes through in art. Sometimes it comes through in architecture. But oftentimes it is the real live person that's there with you. Sometimes it's something funny that they've said. Sometimes it's something that they don't realise is funny. But to my ear, it's odd and it's just hooked.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always about place and a person in that place, and sort of setting a character. Because I try to communicate something that's entertaining. That connects with people. Yes. And there's nothing that connects with people more than people.
Is one day in a port. What are your tips and tricks for meeting locals and finding those people stories in relatively short periods of time?
Yeah, it's a flash in the pan, and it's amazing what you can do in that short time. Often because you have no choice. You have to make it work in that time, and therefore there's an intensity to the travel that doesn't exist when you're doing it in a slower way. And by the way, press trips are always very short because it costs them too much money to make them longer. And so if I ever go on a press trip somewhere, I've got to do it really quickly.
Yeah.
And I'd say my top tip is to talk to people. People are very shy to talk to strangers. We don't do it at home, so why would we do it somewhere else? But actually, going somewhere else opens up your opportunity to start that conversation. Because you can go in very honestly and very openly and say, hey, I'm new here. I know nothing. What do you know?
What can you tell me?
Tell me everything.
Yeah.
I've heard from guests who they've started talking to a local, ended up accepting a car ride with this local, which I don't always recommend, but the local has then given them the locals tour of the town, then said, do you want to come back for a cup of tea? And that can all happen in a day.
That's the magic, yeah.
I wouldn't say you go out looking for that, but to go out open to that happening is the difference. Also, asking questions which you would think, I might get into trouble for that question. The worst that will happen is you get into trouble for asking that question. That's the worst that happens. And so I always ask things that I'm thinking, oh, well, they might say no. Well, they might, but they equally might say yes. It brings us back to prison, actually. When I was in Bhutan, I was doing a story about a new hiking trail that's opened, and it's across the entire country. It's a 250-mile trail, so clearly I wasn't going to be doing it all. But I managed 2 days of hiking, and then I was like, this knee is so much older than the rest of my body. So I didn't see through the hiking trail, but we saw a lot of the country. And so we were driving through to the furthest east that we were going on this trip. And it's a very mountainous country, it's in the Himalayas. And so there'd been a landfall. And this happens there. The road gets blocked. People have to clear the road before you can go.
Yep.
And so we were in a little bit of a backup of cars. And so it looked like we were going to be there for a little while. So we got out of the car and stood on the side of the road. And I climbed up. There was a sort of a mound. And I just looked down, and it was a beautiful valley. The valley goes right down. It gets beautifully bright green. The river going through the middle of it. And there's a building there. And I was like, oh, someone's house. Oh, I'd love to live there. What a great place to be. You're in this beautiful valley right on the river. And so I asked my guide, I was like, who lives there?
I think we all know what's coming here, right?
And he said, that's the prison. And I said, how do I get to go? and he was quite timid. He was like, I don't think you'll be allowed to go. And I said, well, if you'd like me to come back to Bhutan to write another story ever, then the condition of entry
is that I
get to go to the jail. And he said, you'll never get that. And I said, leave it with me. So if I go back, that will be the condition.
You'll be heading to jail.
I'll be going to jail. I don't want to stay for too long.
Just a quick stop.
Minor offence, you know. I'd just be fascinated. The reason it jumped out at me so much isn't because of the prisoners, really. I don't know what they're in there for. By the way, crime in Bhutan is very low, so they're probably in there for something fairly minor. But it just suddenly got me thinking about a room with a view. And it's like, you don't think of a prison cell as having a good view, but somebody on the east wing of that block would be like, hey, I got the suite.
And I know I've been joking with you about the jail stories, but it has fueled a little bit of that. How do countries treat the worst offenders, the poorest, the most difficult of their citizens? And that tells us a lot about a country. People ask us all of the time about favorite places, and I say, God, you can't do that. I have favorite places for things. If you could categorize, when you look at favorite places, what are those categories you're looking for?
Shopping. That shouldn't have been the first one, should it? Oh dear. Gosh, I mean, that's the list, isn't it? Shopping. I love being outdoors.
Okay.
I love nature. I also, unfortunately, have bad hay fever. So I have to be very careful about where I'm outdoors and what time of year. There are certain places where I don't seem to get it so badly. The UK is dreadful. The month of June, if I'm ever in the UK in June, I'm a goner. Write me off. It's such a shame. In Australia, that seems to be December, because it's the equivalent of where June is for the UK.
Yep.
So I have to be careful about that.
Okay.
I love to be outside. I love to be by water, on the water. I don't like the beaches.
Okay.
So I suppose that's unusual for somebody who spends most of their life on a cruise ship. I avoid the beach for a couple of reasons. First, I find it a bit boring.
Yeah.
Second, I'll get burned.
Yeah.
Actually, third, sand everywhere.
Sand in your hearts.
Oh, that's just, who invented sand? A bad idea. Send it back. Yeah, no, not for me.
Okay.
But the other stuff would be culture. I love art.
Okay.
And so I'll go to art galleries. I'll go to some museums. I'm not always a museum person. It depends on the museum. If I'm going to go to a museum, I want it to be an authentic museum rather than what I call a plastic museum. A lot of places as you go around the world have a science museum. A lot of those science museums basically are a load of boards with some writing on them and then a plastic replica of something that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I could look that up online.
Sure.
And I know that sounds a bit ungrateful because these museums are there to educate people and inspire people and connect people. And I guess coming from London, I'm spoiled when it comes to museums.
Yeah.
And so when I travel, I tend not to go to those sorts of museums because we've got an amazing science museum, we've got an amazing natural history museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum for design and culture and art, the National Gallery.
Yeah.
And so I was brought up on those places.
Yeah.
So I have been spoiled. When I go to other places, I try and see something that's locally authentic.
Okay.
because I don't want to compare it
During
to
travel
London.
writing, a lot of times you're doing a column. Now, you did talk about getting to do the whole series on South Africa. Give me another place that you'd really like to do a deep dive in.
Japan.
Ah,
I think I'd like to do Japan for many reasons. The food, the nature. I'd love to see the blossoms in spring.
Yeah.
I know that I'd probably have some breathing issues, but some things are worth it. The culture is so different.
Yeah.
That I'm interested in that. I'm also really interested in the turnaround of Japan, because if you looked at Japan 100 years ago, it was very different, unrecognizably different. And now it's this place which is friends with the world, leading the world. I think it's the third largest economy. It's massive.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
How'd that happen?
And who are the people that turned that around? I'd love to delve into that story.
Give us a lot of food for thought for the ways that we're storytelling and connecting with people, and we are really excited to watch what's next for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is just one of our series with Daniel Edward. Check out our video on travel psychology, his role as a cruise and travel director, and learn a little bit more about his personal life.